Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Mary Ellen Gleason, the Director of Development for Solve M.E, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to welcome you to our very first Legacy League webinar. Welcome to our longtime donors, friends, and board members. Our goal today is to talk about the power of planned giving and talk about the chance to make a real impact in the trajectory of Solve M.E. As you all know, our mission is to make ME/CFS understood, diagnosable, and treatable. So why are we all here? We are forming a Legacy League because we want to honor and celebrate donors and longtime friends who seek to make an impact through legacy and through estate planning. And we want to make sure that we have the opportunity to thank and acknowledge you. So our session today will be in 3 parts. First, we'll hear from Oved Amitay, our president and CEO. Then we'll hear from our special guest speaker, Tim Halloran, who is a partner with McDermott, Will, and Emery. Tim is based in Chicago, and Tim will speak on trends in planned giving and philanthropy, 3 important things to know. Also on our webinar today, we have our development team at Solve. We have Andreas Kui, who is our intern, Ray Johnson, our development coordinator, and Patty Johns Eisenberg, who is our major gifts officer. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Oved, who, by the way, is in Israel.
That's right. Thank you very much, Mary Ellen, and welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. So really, the first thing I would like to say is I'm grateful for all of the support that you've given us, the trust that you have put in Solve over the years, which really in so many ways enable us to accomplish what we have, and that's a part of the reason why I'm here today and why I joined. So I think some of you know, but I wanted to share a little bit about my my professional experience and some of the reasons that I wanted to join Solve and really make a difference. I'm a pharmacist and pharmacologist by training, and was always interested in developing therapies and therapeutic options, particularly for people who are affected by rare diseases that often really have very few options and frankly very little hope. And most of my career was dedicated to what's known as orphan diseases, which are really rare diseases that typically are poorly understood. They do not have a very well characterized a pattern of the disease. The history of the disease, the natural history of the disease is not always known. And typically there's a limited interest in terms of research and almost no pharmaceutical industry involvement. So I mention all of that because myalgic encephalomyelitis, also known as chronic fatigue syndrome or ME/CFS, is not a rare disease in terms of its epidemiology. In other words, in the US, there are certainly more than 200,000 people who are affected by ME/CFS, which is the definition of an orphan disease. But from any other perspective, ME/CFS is really an orphan disease. It is poorly understood still. It does not really generate a lot of interest from a research perspective. And certainly there has been almost no interest from the pharmaceutical industry to develop therapeutic options. And so those characteristics are very familiar to me. And I really wanted to join and bring my experience and my skill set to hopefully work with the community to change that. The one thing that I did not know when I joined was that we're going to be facing COVID-19. And I think many in the community, and certainly my colleagues here at Solve, were certainly aware of the potential risk that because of the viral infection caused by SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, that there may be a post-viral disease which could potentially be very similar to ME/CFS. And certainly quite a few people were concerned about that as early as March of last year. So when I joined, I think we started to hear anecdotally about some people who are not recovering from COVID-19, which started to sound very similar to what we know about ME/CFS. I think it was late in the summer of last year, which is now almost a year ago. I wrote an article with Tony Komarov, one of the lead experts on this disease, and we were already alerting people to the fact that we may see more and more people who are not recovering from COVID-19. And at that point, we started to see a larger number of people that do not recover as quickly as would have expected or would have hoped them to recover. But even then, even in August of last year, the numbers were still relatively small, and to be honest, there was very little attention. Both from media, actually, that Oved was published in the Guardian because we couldn't really get any U.S. media to be interested in this, and certainly the mainstream healthcare community was focused on treating COVID patients, and there was really very little interest or capacity, if you will, to think about the long-term implications of COVID-19. So that was concerning. And the reason that we at Solve and others were interested and concerned about that was the similarity between what we began to see as a post-viral disease, also known as long COVID, or people who are describing themselves as long haulers, and the similarity to ME/CFS was striking. The symptoms that people really mention the most are the fatigue, post-exertional malaise, and the cognitive dysfunction that goes along with that. And all of those were just so similar to ME/CFS that we could not ignore that. And tragic as that is, and with the growing numbers since then, certainly towards the end of the year and the beginning of this year, it was obviously tragic. But from a research perspective, that was also a unique opportunity. And clearly, the ability to follow patients from the time of the infection and understand why do some people recover and some people don't was unique. And that was something that we were never able to look at any time before. So so that really led us to the belief that it's a unique opportunity that all of us must seize and really use to benefit both long haulers or long COVID patients, but also the ME/CFS community, with the hypothesis that there is something that is similar and that we will be able to understand the mechanisms that lead to this post-viral disease. So this is sort of an introduction and an explanation why this has been a much busier year than anyone could have expected. Also difficult in so many levels, but also one that gives us a lot of hope, because now there are tools that we can use to understand and really investigate why the immune system or what changes happen within the immune system that lead some people to develop those symptoms that we recognize as long COVID or ME/CFS. And of course, with COVID-19, there are other symptoms who are specific to this virus, but also there are many people who essentially qualify for the diagnosis of ME/CFS. So really, what we did at Solve was to enable or to leverage all the programs that have been built over the years, and begin to leverage those programs to enable the study that would help us understand long COVID as well as ME/CFS. So a lot of the advocacy work that has been going on for several years now to make sure that there is more government funding, NIH funding for ME/CFS and now for COVID-19 really finally made us put us in a position to ultimately have Congress direct more than $1 billion to long COVID research and to understand ME/CFS. And that continues. So we leveraged our advocacy programs, and of course, we did the same with our research programs, our specific research programs, and first and foremost, the Ramsey program, which has been over the years, over the past several years, has been tremendous in terms of attracting new interest to ME/CFS, researchers, scientists from different disciplines who have not done work on this disease, and can now really begin to work on ME/CFS. And of course, now in this recent cycle that we just closed, we had more than double the number of applications compared to previous years. So a lot of interest. Some of those applications and interests are in the connection between COVID-19 and ME/CFS. And over the past several years, the return on the investment, in other words, the ability to generate additional funding for those researchers who are part of the Ramsey program was 9x. So on every dollar that you supported in terms of the Ramsey program, we generated $9 of additional funding coming from other sources, primarily the NIH, but not only the NIH. So that has been an extraordinarily successful program, and we look forward to have more of those grants be announced later in the summer. So that's a program that has been very successful in creating a network of more than 60 investigators over the years. So that was really an important aspect to open this program for people who are interested in looking at this connection between ME/CFS and long COVID. And of course, we'll see what programs are actually or what applications are actually approved, which is done by a peer review process. So this is not a solve decision. I really work with other experts to make sure that we choose the best applications. And of course, the other major program, which was started by Carol when she was the CEO of Solve, the major investment was in the U+Me registry. And the U+Me registry was really formed as a way to enable research which puts people at the center. So it's a database that really collects information that's coming directly from people affected by the disease, and allows us to understand the disease over a period of time. So we can create a longitudinal data set where people report their experience with the disease using a symptom tracking app. And the program was launched almost a year ago, initially focusing on people with ME/CFS. But again, when we recognized the similarity between long COVID and ME/CFS, we also created a parallel path for people affected by COVID-19 to also be part of the registry. And that would help us to have a direct comparison between these two communities, which I think would have a tremendous impact on our understanding of both of these diseases and the opportunity to identify potential targets for treatment. So these were the things that we did mostly in the second half of last year to really rise to the challenge that the COVID-19 had put in front of all of us. both as individuals as well as healthcare systems and other organizations. And I feel that we really are at the cusp of on the cusp of a change. And again, I regret that COVID-19 was the opportunity to do that, but I think that we now have really a chance to finally understand many of the things that were eluding us for so many years. And I think that we can talk a lot about what we could have done over the past 30 years to be ready for this challenge. But that's not going to probably give us a lot of comfort. But we should focus on what we can do now, which I think will help us to address the needs of people with ME/CFS, long COVID, and frankly be better prepared for the next pandemic or epidemic whenever that comes. So Muriel, maybe I'll stop here and let you continue with the program, or see if there are any questions at this point.
Oh, great. And we do have a couple of questions already, so we'll come back at the end after Tim makes his presentation to tee those up. So
okay, so maybe just as a segue to Tim's
Sure.
part, and really part of the reason why we are here today. I think everything that I just described suggests that we now really are looking at programs that have a horizon which is longer than 1 year. The registry has taken about 2 years, probably more than 2 years, to put together and get to the point of where we are today. We now have more than 3,500 people in the registry that contribute data on a regular basis, and it's growing on a weekly basis. We have 50 to 100 people joining us on a regular basis every week. The Ramsey program is now closing its fourth cycle, so that continues and will obviously will happen more and more in the years to come. So I think we are moving closer to, in this our research and development process, starting at the bench and moving all the way to the bedside. We're now getting closer to the bedside, and as an organization, we would like to transition and have more and more work done that would lead to the testing and identification of treatments and diagnostics, and that takes time. And so the more that we can plan ahead and know that we have the resources to plan some of those programs, which are, again, I think longer than 1 year, that would really put us in a much stronger position if we could do that. So getting all of you involved in our plans, understand what we're trying to do, and think about it really as a long-term project. This is not something that we do just for the next fundraising campaign. This is really the work that we do to ultimately identify and discover treatments that can get to people who can benefit from them. So the more that we can plan together and work together, and know that we have more resources to have a greater impact, I think that would benefit the community. And so talking about that today, I think is a wonderful opportunity, and I'm very glad that we can discuss that.